and 5 pictures a day. For me, it's enough. I don't need more than 5 pictures a day. At first, you do. You need, I'll be honest with you, because getting the right prompt is a bit tricky. You will have to work on it a bit more, and it might take you more than 5 tries, and that's okay. It's about the learning process. This in particular was very quick because it was just a classroom. I wanted a picture of students learning in the classroom and students learning outside the classroom, because this is a typical B2 level sort of exercise. Compare and contrast different learning styles, different learning opportunities. Which do you prefer? You know, this sort of exercise, again, it's a very easy, very simple, very typical of international exams. Here, okay, no, Gemini, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't generate images. Here you've got, this is GenCraft, it's not Gemini, okay? So yes, here GenCraft allows this to create these images, okay? 5 images a day for free. If you want something specific, you're going to have to work for it, okay? So for example, those of you who are saying, before I continue here, Diane, you're asking, can GenCraft be used for examples for the photos task in FCE, CAE? If you can only get 5 pictures, can they be saved? Yes, of course. You can download them, save them, and then these 2 I created like 2 months ago. Okay, so, and these are the typical first certificates, comparing and contrasting different learning opportunities. Okay, some of you asked about images and poetry. Now, I teach English. I teach English as a second language, but I also teach English literature. My students sit for international exams for language and literature in English, and this is what I created. I wanted an image. This is about A Doll's House, if you've read it, by Ibsen. It's a book, it's a play, okay? And let's have a look at here, okay? So you've got you've got the upper class. I needed an upper class woman hiding secrets from her husband and being blackmailed by somebody else. So I needed for it to look something like that, and representing the Banksy style of silhouettes. Okay, so these silhouettes are typical of a Banksy style of, he's a street artist, and we were comparing Banksy and the Doll's House, okay? So, exactly, Claudia. You understood where I was coming from for the IB. So what I wanted to do was to see if they could combine something, okay? Now, here, I can see these images. I can see how these things are being connected, okay? And this is one of the fantastic things that I've got, is that you can create anything you want with those images. This is GenCraft, okay? You can specifically think of the process of not just the images, but also the style. I wanted a silhouette. I didn't want anything else. I needed the silhouette because I needed this specific thing, okay? So there's loads of things that you can do, and it allows you to play around and not always have the same thing. So today, for example, imagine those of you who are working with younger students. The typical thing when we teach children the parts of the body is maybe to create a friendly monster or to create the perfect pet. Now, when they create that friendly monster, what do they do? It has 5 arms, 6 legs, wings, big eyes, all those things. Now, you can put all of that into the prompt of GenCraft, and it creates this new thing. I always put the word cute because I think it's important. A cute tiger with wings, wearing a crown. And this is the sort of thing that we can do with our students. So really, the limit is our imagination. You asked earlier about, you asked specifically earlier about the importance of if we can use AI in creativity. Here you can. I'm very creative. I don't have any artistic skills when it comes to drawing. Okay? So the idea, of course, is to be able to find all of this. Okay? So the idea, of course, is to find all these sorts of things and be able to move forward. So another aspect, and this is probably one of the greatest things I particularly love about AI, and this is with Gemini or with ChatGPT, is the ability to leave you with data-driven insights. Now, this is what AI is probably the best thing for you. We are allowed to, it allows us to have this moment of AI, what it does really is has input. It can summarize it very quickly, analyze it very quickly, and give you an outcome. Okay, it gives you that data-driven insight. Now, data-driven insight is a big thing in education. We've been trying to do it a lot, from the data and create the next few steps on how to help our students. And sometimes we think of like big data. Okay, usually test scores are available for that. But in this particular case, I did something for my students. So the first thing we need to know is think about safeguarding. Everything that is online stays there forever. I don't know what AI does with what I input. I know it stores it. It stores the prompts and it keeps all that. If I put complete works of my students' writing, it could in the future affect copyright issues. It could affect, we don't know what's going to happen in the future when it comes to AI. So in this case, I use my common sense. My common sense tells me I can't put everything. So I'm going to use specifics. So for example, I'm going to use the introduction. I want to focus on my students' introductions to their essays. Are they doing good essays or not? So what did I do? I copied and pasted, these pictures. I copied and pasted the introductions into Gemini or ChatGPT, whichever the two is fine. And I asked it, look at the prompt. This is the prompts that you can see here. Compare introductions to an essay at a B2 level and identify common trends between students. Give me tips on how to help students write a better introduction. Okay, so what are the common trends? So I copy-pasted their work. What were the common trends? Engaging with the prompt. Both introductions directly addressed the statement. Students had to write, teenagers are too young to teach anyone. Okay, that was the topic of their essay, and they had to write a for and against essay. Again, typical aspects, typical exercises of a B2 sort of level student. From there, they had to write the essay, stating a position. While subtle, both introductions hint at the writer's stance. Okay, introduction uses a bit unfair, doesn't mean they can't, and introduction use seems a bit unfair, doesn't mean they can't, to offer that similarity. Okay, I can't remember if it was Gemini or ChatGPT, but either of the two, I use both of them indistinctively. One day I use ChatGPT, the next day I use Gemini. So I just try things out. And of course, the transition sentence, they both use it to move from one statement to the other. So these two introductions, these are the trends. They are both engaging, they both state a position, and they both have a transition sentence from introduction to the body. Okay? And then I asked it to give me tips on how to fix it. Well, the formality of introduction 1 was more casual, okay? Whereas introduction 2 was more formal. Okay, so I knew from one student I had to give it, okay, let's focus on formality. Complex of structures. Uses introduction to complex sentences like while life undoubtedly plays, demonstrating a stronger grasp of a B2 level grammar. So what can I do with this afterwards? I can go to the board and get my students. I only did it for 2 introductions, but you can do it for more. Okay? Christina, this is why I said we can't use all of it. Okay? I only focused on the introduction because I wanted to specifically focus on the introduction of my students. And it wasn't their final product, it was just an in-class activity. Write the introduction to this essay, and they wrote it. Okay? Zachariah, yes, the first time I do it with them. Okay? You're going ahead of me. I'll show you the process that I did and then how my students continued after that. So my students, I went to the board and said, okay, everyone, let's have a look at what we see here. The common trends are, both of you are doing this. You're engaging with a prompt, you're stating a position, your transitioning is great. But let's focus on the formality. Read your formality. What functions have we learned? And you can talk about the functions that they've learned, the grammar that they've learned. Identify any of these functions in your writing. Can you rewrite sentences with this? Now, what I'm doing with my students here is I'm focusing. What am I doing with my students? I am working through the process. I am working with them. I'm asking them to reflect on their writing. Now, I honestly think that the most important thing that goes hand in hand with the use of AI is reflection. This data-driven insight is probably the biggest advantage that it has over anything else that we've done, any other tools that we can use in the classroom. And this is something that will help us in the future. So if my students get to start with, okay, instead of rewriting this, they had to rewrite it. They went through the process. Okay, so the process was AI helped identify the issues. Now, let's go to the next step of AI is going to help me with this aspect. And this is what do I need to identify? Find the trends, okay? What is it that I'm going to do and how am I going to move forward from this? And after this, I take the next step forward, which is moving on with also more focus on different areas. Now, all of these things have helped me focus and give my students the ability to really reflect. And this is what I love about AI. It removes the pressure of me finding, because in the past what I would do is that I would, after doing all of that, I would read each one, identify trends, and then after that, I would post them on the board, and then the teaching would start. Now, I would do that from one day to the next, if I was lucky and if I had time. It took me a long time to really plan, but with this, the energy that takes me to identify common trends and see what general ideas I can help most of my class with, that took a lot of energy. Now that energy that takes a while is being put where? Into the actual plan. So I create a checklist. And then from the checklist, I say, okay, let's start rewriting these sentences. Identify sentences that we can use past perfect, that you can use these particular linkers, that you can use conditionals. And then from there, that energy that took me, because planning takes energy, it takes time. So if we use the identification part, which is probably the most trickiest, and it takes time. And from there, we put it into ChatGPT or Gemini. We get that insight, and then I plan based on that insight. Imagine the consequences and imagine the process and the thinking that goes behind it, because you're asking students to really focus on you're really focusing on the reflection, and that is what we need to help students with. For example, this was something in particular that I asked for personalized feedback. My prompt was compare introductions to an essay at B2 level, identify common trends between students, and give me tips. Now I asked them to give me tips on how to help students write a better introduction. Now, instead of rewriting, because why do I do this with them? I afterwards show them my process. Because if I just get my students to rewrite, they will probably do rewrite and not focus on the process. And again, I really want them to really reflect. Reflection is a huge part of my classroom. It's probably the most important thing. It's the most important skill that my students will learn by the time they finish my class. I don't care if they remember the content or not. What I remember is that they are able to reflect, and they can in the future. So when I ask them to do that,